their broadcast, but a hospital in Las Vegas has recently been successfully sued for tens of millions of dollars for refusal to provide effective pain management to the daughter of a family that later watched her decline into disability and depression and eventually commit suicide.
Wow.
And the suit found, or at least the court finding was that the hospital was liable for both direct damages and punitive damages.
Wow.
So
was
that
this
could be a
doctors there?
real.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry?
This is a huge breakthrough. It was the
changer.
doctors involved, right? I mean, they must have been working for the hospital. Right. Okay.
Well,
Ooh.
yeah, and she was admitted to the hospital and refused appropriate pain treatment with opioids. And I'm not entirely sure of all of the details, but she was basically put on non-opioid analgesics, and they were not effective. And despite several requests for assistance and basically appeals for assistance, they denied her treatment with medications that could have worked, and they killed her.
Yep, and this is going on.
They drove her into what amounted to doctor-facilitated suicide.
It's going on all over.
That term. Yeah, it is, and that term is not in the judgment, by the way. But I think that's what's going to be found eventually on it.
Thanks.
So that's real new news. Now, on the other side of news, I believe the state of Ohio is now in the process of doing the same kind of nonsense, or trying to do the same kind of nonsense that Oregon has been trying to do, because they are also using opioid-sparing policies. And there are no less than 4 states that have recently been announced in news as having started to initiate letters to doctors whose patients die of an opioid-related cause, no matter whether it was related to something that was involved in their treatment for pain or not. And the letters are being initiated by states' attorney generals. And the whole point of the exercise, even though the attorney generals are disclaiming any responsibility for this, the whole point of the exercise is to increase the negativity in the regulatory environment so that doctors won't be comfortable prescribing opioids to anyone. This is happening in California, it's happening in Massachusetts, it's happening in Ohio, and I believe there's one other state where this is also occurring. And it's basically a naked attempt to legislate the end of opioids in practice.
The similar thing happened. Yeah, oddly, a similar thing happened back in 1932, 1933, when a fellow by the name of Anslinger, Henry Anslinger, became the chief of the Narcotics Bureau of the Treasury Department at the time. And he thought that arresting doctors, and he did it on purpose, would serve as an example, because doctors are the ones who hand out the demon opiates or narcotics. So this has been going on for a long time, and we've kind of forget the past history. In 1915, same thing, raiding doctors, locking them up for distributing dope. So here we are, 100 years later. Yeah.
Imagine that. Well,
doing the dance again.
Let me ask a few mailbag questions, because there's many of them, and I have to pick at least 3. So a woman asked, my doctor has a sign in her office that states, due to federal mandated laws and the MME, she will only prescribe 15 MMEs a day per patient. How do you call out your doctor that she's lying without offending her, making her mad, and kicking you out of her practice?
Well, you print out.
Yeah, go ahead, Red.
Go.
Yep.
You can print out the resolutions that were published by the American Medical Association this fall, which basically, that was in their House of Delegates meeting, and the AMA is now officially on record as indicating that the use of morphine milligram equivalent dose can never be useful for anything except as a general guide, and that no physician or healthcare provider should ever be sanctioned solely on the basis of the volume of opioids that they prescribe. That's Resolution 235 from the House of Delegates meeting. Basically, I think it was November, might have been October, and that document is available and is in wide discussion. You can find it in a Google search very easily. And matter of fact, I have communicated with the president of the AMA about it, and with the fellow who wrote those resolutions. So they're out there, and they are a formal public position of the AMA. And the AMA is saying the very same thing that you were, Dr. Kline, that basically, no, there is no maximum limit on the practice of opioid therapy, and there shouldn't be, because it's very clear that there are many people who benefit from opioid therapy at dose rates significantly higher than the 90 mmED that is mentioned as a safety review threshold in the CDC guidelines of 2016. Now, the question as it was posed has one other little wrinkle in it. How can you do that without offending someone? You can do it, you can point out that the physician, especially if it's in writing, if the practice has notified someone that they are no longer able to prescribe because of federal limitations, you can point out, and you can do it in writing or you can do it in person, that there is no such federal law, and in fact, that the denial of effective pain treatment is grounds for formal complaint to sanction a doctor's license on grounds of patient abuse. And that's for somebody who's willing to be a little bit confrontive in a reasonable tone of voice. Clearly, you're not going to go out there cursing and swearing and raising merry hell. But you have to be willing to stand up and say, this is wrong. And it's not only wrong because I think so, it's wrong because objectively there is no such law, and you know it.
Okay. Dr.
The other thing you can do, we've been switching Red over to the idea of undertreatment rather than tapering or stopping. Tapering kind of sounds like, well, maybe the doctor was right. Stopping, oh my goodness, maybe the doctor thought you were being poisoned. But undertreatment is always negligent. Mm-hmm. There is no way that a doctor can say, oh, I'm undertreating because there's no answer to that. So I think people need to file complaints with the Board of Registration in Medicine online. There's a little button, you just press it. You be courteous, you put down just the facts, and you say, I am currently being undertreated by Dr. Jones, period. Don't put anything down about that's the doctor's problem if they're following something that's not true. You just file a complaint. Now, people are afraid they're going to be cut off. And you know what? When you go public, your chances of being cut off are actually less. It's guts ball when you do this. But if they do cut you off, you have grounds for a second complaint against the doctor, discharging you because you spoke up. So I'm generally recommending that people just think about it and file complaints and just make it real simple. I was on this medicine, it worked. Now my doctor is purposely undertreating me without my permission, and now I'm a wreck.
Okay.
So yeah, a couple of things that we can add to that too, and this is also a part of the primary subject of the program tonight. I've actually talked in person with the chairman of a state medical board. And one of the things that he told me was when patients have been told by a doctor in our state that they are being forced to taper back on medications to a level that is no longer effective for the patient, the state medical board actively wants to hear from those people so that we can investigate that doctor.
Wow.
And that's one state medical board. It's not the only thing going on, and we know that there's a lot of non-uniformity going on out there.
But even one is important. Yep. Mm-hmm. I agree. That's wonderful.
Okay. Another question. This is for Dr. Kline. When and where will you publish the definition of palliative care?
It's already published.
Okay.
You just go to Google Medium palliative care. Should get you there. You can add Kline, and that'll take you to my Medium page, and it should be there. And if it's not, let me know.
Okay.
I'm sort of in charge of it, and that's not really a good idea. But anyway, yeah, let me know if you can't find it.
Okay.
And it's a nice little blurb, and also it's in there. It tells the doctors how to make money seeing chronic pain patients, because the CMS is allowing now for non-face time billing called Chronic Care Management, CCM, and very few doctors are using it. It's definitely a great thing, and so it's in that same document. And what you do is you make a copy of the document, and remember the rule, do not take it in with the appointment. You either drop it off, put it in the mail, and it will get into the mailbox, into the inbox, doctor will read it, and they will have to put it in the chart. Anything that you send to a doctor has to be put in the chart. That's the rule. So then the physician has a chance to read it. It's not during an 8-minute visit. And so if any changes are going to occur, they'll do that. But it's on Medium.
Okay. And this one was geared towards Red. There seems to be some confusion about the HHS forms Red is asking to fill out. Might he clarify? I'd make the point to have everyone write, deluge them, friends, churchgoers, get groups together, speak about their surveillance and injustice, etc. Right?
Yeah, okay. So that takes us right back into the core of what we're talking about here. Let me preface this a little bit so we can get the context for this. The first thing is you need to understand what the HHS Task Force on Best Practices in Pain Management really is and what they've been asked to do. Back in 2016, there was an act of Congress, I believe it is called the CARA Act, Comprehensive Addiction Recovery, and I don't know what the A was for, but at any rate, it was another omnibus bill that was passed by Congress, both houses, and signed into law that basically is trying to address a wide variety of concerns and issues with regard to addiction and pain management and things related to those things. And one of the things that act of Congress did was it directed the Department of Health and Human Services to convene an interagency task force to examine the existing published practice standards for the treatment of pain and for the management of pain, and to identify contradictions between published documents, and to identify missing elements of those published practice standards, and to make recommendations concerning the harmonization of standards throughout the field. Now, it took them a little while to get started, but starting in the fall of 2017, they put out a request for people to volunteer to be on this panel. It's being headed up by a doctor by the name of Vanilla Singh, S-I-N-G-H, who is the Chief Medical Officer in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health. I have met Dr. Singh on a number of occasions. She's a thoroughly humane physician. And it has, I think, something on the order of 25 other members. Some of them are from other federal agencies, and that includes, let's see, the National Capital Region Pain Initiative and the National Consortium on Pain Medicine for a fellowship. A director in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research in the FDA. I've met Sharon Hertz. And quite a number of others. And I might add, the people that are on this list happen to include one representative from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Division of Unintentional Injury Prevention. Now, these were the folks that wrote the 2016 guidelines. And what these folks did was they put together 2 public meetings, one of them May 30th of last year, and the other one September 25th. And they put all their people around a table, and they basically said, well, here's a list of the documents we've got to read, and here's some of the issues that we need to address with regard to making recommendations. And the recommendations now are being made to Congress. And then they basically invited public comment on both of those meetings, and they took a good, I think it was almost 3 months, October, November, and December of 2018. They put all of their own recommendations together. And I want to emphasize this. These folks are very, very competent. This is a group of people that represents authoritative talent. And interestingly enough, they did something that I'm pretty sure Congress never intended that they would do. They wrote a patient-centered set of recommendations. And if you read it, and it's 68 pages, I think. It's not a trivial document. But if you read all the way through it, you find an awful lot of things that as patients and as caregivers and as physicians, we should really be applauding. I want to say that very clearly. They've done tremendous work here. And they took their recommendations and they put them up for public comment with the Federal Register. Now, there's one way you can get into this that's very simple. Let me mention it. You can do a Google search on the phrase, "tell the task force." And if you want to add a national pain report to that, it'll get you to my article on the subject. It's advice on how you comment to the task force on pain management. So we got to make a distinction. And, guys, Tom particularly, stop me and ask me to take a breath if you think I need to in the middle of this, because we're going to go around on this for a while. This article is Tell the Task Force, Advice on Commenting to the HHS Task Force on Pain Management. And what I tried to do in this article on National Pain Report was to kind of review the bidding and to say, okay, if you're not a doctor and you're commenting on the recommendations that doctors are making to Congress, that you're not disqualified. In fact, you are very eminently qualified. If you're a medical professional, that's fine. But if you're a patient or a caregiver and you've observed the problems people are having getting pain medication and getting effective therapy, then you can comment on that, and it can be very useful as long as you do it in your own words, because there is a little bit of a kind of a hidden handshake going on here. The reality is that anybody that asks for comments in this field is going to get a certain amount of spam. And there are people who are writing duplicate letters to put into the Federal Task Force. There is, by the way, a link in the article I've just mentioned in Tell the Task Force. There's a link to the online gateway where you can make your comments. So you don't want to copy somebody else's comments, and specifically you don't want to copy mine. I've already put in 38 pages of comments that have 65 separate comments with rationales and 45 references. So trust me, there are some of us who are really going after this in depth. But there are things that you can comment on in a very focused way that will be very helpful to the task force, because they're going to have to convince an awful lot of people that there's really a problem here that their recommendations are addressing. Okay. Here's a big one. If your doctor has told you, just like the comment we had first in one of the first three questions, if they've told you that they're afraid of losing their medical license or their admission privileges or something to do with the insurance companies because the DEA or somebody else might investigate them for overprescribing, that experience is something the task force needs to hear. If the doctor has refused to continue treating you with opioids or demanded that you taper them down, even though you've never failed a drug test or taken more than prescribed, then that's something else you want to tell the task force about. If they've said that the CDC guidelines are a law and they're not allowed to prescribe more than some fixed amount, that's something you should tell the task force, because it's a damn lie. It's not true. It never was true. And if we listen to the AMA, it better darn well never be true. If you've had a bad reaction to Tylenol or ibuprofen that was prescribed instead of opioid pain relievers, or if they just haven't worked, which for a lot of people they don't, especially in moderate to severe pain, then that's something to tell the task force. Now, I'll let the listeners go look up the article. It's very easy. You can Google the phrase, tell the task force, and if you want to, you can add my name to it because I'm the author of the article. And that'll get you to an overview of what kinds of things you can say to the task force with a link to the place where you can either submit your comment by email or go to the Federal Register and submit it there.
Excuse me, Red, just 1 minute. Would you tell the audience again how they can Google and get to the actual site? And I'll just tell everybody that I've done this many times. It's very user-friendly. You just go and you put in these comment sections and you just write whatever you want. They do limit you to like 5,000 words. But remember, they are going to read every single one. So make them brief and to the point. I went to my doctor. I was doing fine. He told me the CDC is making him undertreat me on purpose. And now I cannot do the things I could do before. Give some examples. These are human beings who are going to read this. They want to know that on the medicine, you were a full participant in the community. You may have worked or gone to school, may have interfered with your sex life, which it does very frequently. Mm-hmm. And just be real upfront and say, then when the doctor undertreated me, always use that word, undertreated, here's what happened. I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. Human stories. So Red is correct. Mm-hmm. And now, how do they find this website again, Red? What do they Google?
You Google the phrase, tell the task force.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that'll get you to the
it'll
federal
come up
task force.
Okay.
That's
just tell the task force.
Okay, I put it up on
tell
YouTube.
The task force.
All right. Do you guys mind if we take a call? Because we have some calls. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Caller from area code 678. What is your name and what's your question?
Hello.
Hi. What's your name and what's your question?
Hi, my name is Dana.
Hi, Dana.
Hi. Yes. This is for Dr. Kline. And Jonelle, I spoke with you earlier today by messenger.
Yes, I remember.
I'm 14 years into my journey, and I'm from Georgia. I've got multiple issues. Since 2009, I've gone through a total of 7 spinal surgeries, and the first one was in 2009. In December of 2018, my doctor took away my soma. This is the only muscle relaxer that has ever worked for me. And of course, that was because they said the CDC wouldn't, because I have anxiety and PTSD. Said, and I take a low milligram twice a day of Xanax. So I couldn't have it because I was on the benzo. So,
okay, let me interrupt you for a minute. That's a very good point. And one of the things that Red is talking about is getting that information to the task force, because the study that was done that's caused everybody to tell their patients to stop taking this stuff was bogus, because I read it word for word. It's bogus. Now, this is what the task force can do. They can look up these articles and they can say, sorry, this article is not of scientific validity, and therefore all the doctors running around taking people off the soma, off their Xanax, off their Valium, are basically practicing negligent medicine, because lo and behold, there's no valid reason they should be doing that. So see how important it is for you to tell that story on this at the federal website, which again is what? My short-term memory loss. I'm trying to take this medicine, but it didn't work.
Just a minute, I'll get it for you.
If you can find it, Brad.
The website itself has a real long address on
Okay,
it.
so
That's
what's
a
the
little
short
hard to
form
do.
again?
But
Go tell
the
it on the
short
mountain?
form-
What?
No, tell the task force.
Tell the task force.
Tell the
Okay,
task
we
force.
gotta tell the task force. So for the caller,
That title,
you know, you've already got your story. You've told us enough, and this is what they need to hear. So tell the task force. Go there and
right.
do your part. The more, the better. Believe me. And a lot of people think, I'm wasting my time. Yeah. Not true. Not true. They really do want to hear.
Yeah, let me add to that, if I might, Tom.
Sure.
Something that people have told me is, well, it's only window dressing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what that window dressing got for us, though. I was in both of the meetings, both days of both meetings, and I addressed them. Matter of fact, I was one of those who gave public comments in both. But apart from my specific human input, there were pain patients who stood in front of that group, and one of them related the story of her mother, who was accused of drug seeking and sent home without pain treatment, only to return a few days later and die of pancreatitis. Now that was a patient story that really mattered. Likewise, the chairman of this group, Dr. Singh, invited 2 panels of people who are pain patients themselves, and a panel that involved an individual who has sickle cell anemia. Matter of fact, more than one individual with sickle cell anemia, and invited them to address the members of the task force right there around the table. They had a panel discussion, and each of these people made their input, and they were heard, and they were listened to very attentively by the experts in this panel. The first meeting that was held also had what's called a public docket. That's the same thing we've just been talking about. And that meeting got over 1,000 comments. The second meeting got even more. The draft recommendations that are now up at the Assistant Secretary of Health site are up for 90 days, and the period expires on April 1st. Gosh, isn't that appropriate? April Fool's Day. But in the first 5 weeks of comments, they have gotten over 850 comments in just the first third of the comment period, and they've posted at least 650 of them in the archives for analysis. So believe me, they are reading the comments.
650 is good. I'd like to see 10,000. This is what they need gigantic numbers. So, and I'm going to put this on my Twitter feed, and we can put it out there.
Yeah.
This is your important duty, because this is the first time these federal agencies have gotten together and look like they're going to do something important for people with painful disease. So you just go on there. You don't have to do a long blurb. Get your friends to go on there, and let's get this. I'm serious. Let's get this to 10,000.
Yeah.
If you put 10,000 comments on there, believe me, it's going to have an impact. It's just like voting. Oh, what good is it if I vote? No, this is a group thing. We need to all stick together, doctors and patients, and get those comments out on Tell It To.
Right.
Tell the
task force.
Dana,
Tell the task force.
Are you still there,
Tell
Dana?
the task force.
Tell the task force.
Dana,
Right,
are you still there?
So let me add to that. If
May I add something else?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure, go.
I also, like I said, I've got a multitude of issues, but I'm first generation with issues from, my father was, died from issues from Agent Orange. Mm-hmm. I'm first generation, being the daughter, and I have issues from that. But when I was born, and I couldn't, it's a $10,000 word that I couldn't tell you, but it because of it, it exasperates my pain. So,
yeah, can I respond to that just a little bit, please? I don't want to cut you off, Miss, but I do want to make something clear. Agent Orange is a very focused issue, and you're certainly at liberty to speak to it and to write to it when you comment, but you need to be aware that Agent Orange as such does not appear anywhere explicitly in the recommendations that the task force has made or is making and proposing to make to Congress. So that being the case, you should feel yourself to be at liberty in your comment to them to say you need to speak explicitly to Agent Orange and its effects across generations. And that is a thing that I think will be heard. I don't know how many people will make that comment, but it's only one of many nuances and issues that are going to come up in this context.
Okay, my only, my concern is that's all just a $10,000 word, and I know it, but I can't pronounce it, so I don't want to go there and try to pronounce it. But I was born with it. I've had it all my life. It's a blood disorder. And I have, other issues from that, but it doesn't make my pain worse. So with this pain management doctor that I'm dealing with, this last week he cut my oxycodone back from 30 milligrams to 20, and he's had argument after argument with my surgeon on my fentanyl patches. He won't agree to raise them.
So what are you asking?
Okay, so here's the...
Go ahead.
Tom Kline really got this one all, got it in one when he first made the comment. Here's something to be aware of as background, just a little bit, and others in the audience I think need to be aware of this as well. There is an action underway right now by the Oregon Medicaid people in which they're trying to force all, or they have been trying, it's not quite that clear now, but they have been trying to force tapering to zero of all opioid treated patients in Oregon Medicare. One of the really, really fascinating things that came up in that context, and it's something for you to be aware of, and it can be found online. The four past presidents of the American Academy of Pain Medicine wrote a letter to the governor of Oregon in which they told her there is no published data demonstrating benefit from any mandated tapering of opioid therapy. There isn't any. Moreover, there is well-established concern that the unilateral tapering of a patient may cause them to go into medical collapse. This is not an appropriate standard of practice. So what we've got is the presidents of the AMA, of the American Academy of Pain Medicine, and of quite a number of other major organizations telling authorities at state level and at federal level, guys, forcing a pain patient, a legacy patient, to withdraw from opioids is flat out medically wrong.
Are they listening?
There's another article here.
Are they listening?
I'm sorry?
Are they listening?
I think we're beginning to see indications, as a matter of fact. There's another thing that's really important because it reaches a lot of doctors. Last October and then again in January, I believe it was, the journal Pain Medicine, which is one of the premier journals for doctors, put out an editorial that basically, it was signed off by 125 physicians and professionals and advocates. I was one of them, in which they basically gave out the same message, and they basically said there is no basis for mandatory tapering, and federal agencies need to go back to the drawing board and re-involve the stakeholders in this problem and revise their view of what the problem really is. And I'm not quoting now. I realize I'm not quoting the article. I don't have it in front of me. But when a journal as important as Pain Medicine comes out and provides a forum for 125 doctors to say, CDC, you screwed up, which is liberally translated exactly what that article means. That is really groundbreaking. I might add, I talked to a lot of people folks like you, Tom, and others who write as experts in this field. And what I'm hearing from them is we're not there yet, but the holy ruckus that has been stirred up by the HHS task force is really beginning to get this issue on the front burner. And there are now many more in Congress who are getting very, very nervous that they have messed up.
Okay. And also, too, Red, I think, that we need to start pointing out to politicians that there's 10 million people in the U.S., according to NIH Director Nora Volkow. 10 million people, along with how many family members? 2, 3? That's 30 million people. Guess what? That's 10% of the population. Guess what? Elections are won by 1%, 2%. There's a huge population of voters out there, and all you got to do is stand up and say, you're in favor of the government not interfering with the practice of medicine, period, and you will get 20 to 30 million votes. And all politicians are thinking about right now is the next election.
That's right.
So we can send things to the executive branch, the hearings that are going on, which is very important, but according to the framers of the Constitution, it's the Congress who is really watching the executive branch. So a twin, attack, you go in there directly, and then you start letting your senators know in large numbers. They have no idea. I have calculated there's about 6 million people being screwed, and everybody goes, no, can't be that much. No.
It is that much.
There's 10 million. There's 10 million people, and 3 independent surveys have said 2/3 of them are being tapered.
Hey, gentlemen, we have another call if you don't mind.
Yep.
Is it okay if we take it? All right. Caller from area code 203. What is your name and what's your question?
Hi, this is Shirley Pina.
Hi, Shirley. Hey, could you turn your background audio off, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. There.
Okay. What's your question?
Hi, Janelle.
Hi.
It's Shirley Pina.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm calling about the question I posed from going to see a new provider at the beginning of the year. I had to because my insurance changed, and on my second visit, I was told that's when she would take over my medication management, and she said that she tried calling me for the past week, which I guess she was doing it from a blocked number, so I don't accept those. But she could have called from the office, which she chose not to for whatever reason. But she told me to my face that if I didn't come down from 160 MMEs to 120, that she wouldn't accept me as her patient. And I'm wondering if that's legal or not, because here I am.
No, it's not legal. It's not legal. It's not ethical, and it's not even kind.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
An act of kindness is never wasted. How many people going back 100,000 years to the caves are going to say, oh, one of our family members is in pain. Oh, well, too bad. And that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of the meeting of our show tonight is it's important for you to take that story and tell it to these people in Washington who are listening. They're listening. So, and don't be shy. It's an easy website to use, very friendly. You don't have to go on and on. Just say, what you just said to me has got me so enraged that I'm just enraged. So I think that you can help by telling that story. My doctor told me I had to go into under treatment, use that word. I had to be purposely undertreated in order to treat her comfort zone. And when I asked her why, she didn't really have a very good medical reason. They should have medical reasons to do these things. And that's it. Just say that.
Oh, she told me it's the state.
Oh, yeah, and that's a lie. So just put that in there. Go ahead, Red.
Let's be a little cautious here because it's something we need to realize. There are 22 states that have regulations, and in some cases laws, that limit either the amount that can be prescribed in Vermont, in Maine, I believe it's 100 morphine milligram, or the length of time that the prescription can be written for. So there are some state regulations in this that are really interfering with practice. So we need to realize that's out there in the environment.
But you can put that in your report. When you file your report, you can say, "Oh, there's state laws." Now, there's a little bit of a problem with states trying to override the federal laws. It's called nullification. It's what got us into the Civil War. A state cannot pass its own law that overrules a federal law or a federal regulation. Well, so the FDA has these regulations.
Well, in the end, though, doesn't... Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There is no federal law that limits opioid prescription. So that's right. Where the states they're using a loophole.
Right. I talked to my Attorney General staff, and that's what I was told. He says, once you find out the exact reason she's telling you that, please explain to me, because there's no new law in Connecticut. I don't know of.
Okay, well, that's even better. You don't have any laws. You don't have to get into this nullification. It's called the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution. When Congress established the FDA writes regulations. Those have the power of federal law. If you try to change that at the state level, you are nullifying, and you're okay. So put that in your little report. You checked with the Attorney General, and he said, hey, there's no law. These doctors are making it up. And if you make up stuff as a doctor and harm somebody, ooh.
Well, what about, doesn't a doctor at the end of the day have like the end say, though, of what they want to do?
Not if they're harming somebody.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I was saying...
I've had a history since 2005 taking the same type of medication and with no side effects or anything. If anything, I came down from a higher dose myself. I said, look, let's reduce. And this was back 4 years ago.
All right, put that in your report. Put that in your report. These people want to read this stuff. Yeah, perfect. Good story.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Red.
Let me try a couple of other things on you while we got an audience here. Would you mind?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, here's a couple things to think about. First of all, I'm one of those who wrote a petition to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in the Department of Health and Human Services, because they're also active in this business. And one of the things that I told them is the thing that started most of the worst of this problem was the 2016 CDC guidelines on opioid prescription and chronic pain for adults. Mm-hmm. That one document needs to be publicly withdrawn and rewritten from the ground up. And that is a message that the task force needs to hear loud and clear from both doctors and patients, because that guideline is responsible for many of the things that the states are now using as excuses to force withdrawal of opioid therapy.
You know, it's funny, Red, that the CDC has come out repeatedly and said they never recommended tapering anybody. And that's true. If you read this, which is hard to do, however, if you word search tapering, it comes up 42 times. That's a lot of mentioning of tapering when they really aren't recommending tapering. Also, it's odd that it's a guideline for the treatment of chronic pain. There's no suggestions on who to treat. It's a gigantic document about who not to treat.
Tom, even beyond that, it's interesting that the CDC doesn't have a legal charter to write those guidelines.
Correct.
That's the FDA's charter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the CDC is basically trying to impose their own will on policy, and they're doing it transparently badly. They have created a hostile regulatory environment, and they knew exactly what they were doing when they did it.
Well, and two, Red, it's time that we bring this to the attention of the new Democratic Committee on Oversight in the House of Representatives. These are the people that can listen and make changes. So we need a dual attack. We need to get the CDC and the DEA before the committee and to explain themselves. What is this stuff about overprescribing? people get addicted on the very first dose. So what difference does it make? You know, and start putting their feet to the fire. They're practicing medicine without a license. And, you know, generally, I think people do not want the federal government getting between their doctors and themselves as patients. So I think we have a golden opportunity with, and let me tell you this, the guy that runs the committee.
Which committee is it?
This is the House Oversight Committee.
House Oversight, okay.
And do you know what? I found out that the House Oversight Committee has a phone number. And do you know what? You can submit your own requests for the committee to look at.
Do you
know
the number?
It's a wonderful thing. You just look up. You look up House Committee on Oversight, and you should get a 202 phone number, and you just call up, and they'll give you instructions on how you, as a citizen, can ask this committee to look into things.
Okay.
In fact, that's one of the things that happened during the CDC writing process. The House Oversight Committee forced the CDC to accept public comments for longer than the 3-day period that they attempted to get away with. There's another thing involved here, if I might. I'll add this to the picture. Again, this is a resource for the people that are listening in on this, and you can use this in your own comments, or you can use it in comments to your doctor. I'm one of the few people out there right now who has actually looked at the CDC's data on prescribing rates and opioid-related mortality. And here's the big light bulb going off moment. There is no relationship between the two. Now, I don't know if I'm not looking at the program right now, so I don't know if you have the charts up there.
Yeah, which one did you want? Is it the RX rate?
Let's do the first chart that has the line and the nice cluster of dots.
Okay. Okay. Brian, can you show that?
If you can put that up.
I will get that up.
Get me on?
Yeah, hang on.
Okay, so
that's a good chart.
Here's the logic. Here's the logic behind that chart. If there was a relationship, any relationship at all, between the rate of opioid prescribing that doctors use when they're treating patients and the rates of opioid-related deaths from all sources, then we ought to see a relationship rather like the one that's in this chart. It has a line that rises from left to right. It might not necessarily be straight line. It might be slightly curved. It's hard to say. And it would have the data points on a state-by-state basis kind of grouped around that line. And the first chart that you're seeing should look that way. Now, there's a second chart that's really very important in this. I want you to bring that one up now, if you would, please.
Okay, which one?
The second chart has green dots on it.
I only have black and white, sorry.
No, that's all right. Black and white dot. But it has a line that basically is almost flat.
Okay.
Okay, that line, this is the data that actually exists that the CDC has published. And you'll notice that in this chart, I'm sorry, go.
Is it longitudinal analysis of opioid ODs by age? Overdose deaths? No.
Yeah, right.
That one? Okay.
Okay. Right. It's got a title on it. Now, when you look at this chart, you see something very different from the one that we just showed you. This looks like a shotgun pattern.
Oh, that was
and it looks that way because there is no relationship between the amount of prescribing that doctors do for their patients and the numbers of opioid-related deaths from all sources. And the reason for that is that the contribution of medically managed opioids to opioid-related mortality, that's deaths, is so small that it is lost in the noise. You can't see it. It doesn't move the meter. And that absolutely blows the legs out from under the entire false narrative that has been used by the CDC to justify its guidelines. Because the CDC assumed, without proof, that overprescribing is the problem and the solution is restricting the availability of opioids to patients. That assumption was never tested. It was never supported by data. And it's not only wrong, it's fraudulent. And the CDC knows it.
Well, this is the information that needs to go before the House Oversight Committee.
Absolutely.
Is there
I'm working just as you.
Yeah, is there any plan by folks to make a presentation or request to the committee?
Well, I've already gone into the whistleblower gateway once myself, and I have one other little action going that I hopefully will be able to check on rather soon. I filed a formal complaint with the Office of the Inspector General in the Department of Health and Human Services against the CDC on grounds of gross misbehavior, malfeasance, and fraud in their handling of the research behind the CDC guidelines. And I provided detailed information and references that show these charts. Now, I was told by somebody in that organization, in the Office of the IG, that they're never ever going to respond to me personally. And if I really want to find out what happened with my formal complaint, I've got to file a Freedom of Information Act request, and I'm about to do that. I'm going to basically be saying, you got to give me all data that are relevant to this complaint made on this date by this person, mainly me. And let's see if they come up with anything. I have a suspicion that they're going to try to stonewall me because the CDC has been stonewalling the same request for over 3 years. They have a FOIA request outstanding.
Let me ask you a question. We've had, I don't know, about 600 opioid conferences, summits, blah, blah, and now we have an interagency summit. What's behind this?
Everybody wants a piece of the action. In fact, there are at least 6 different federal agencies that now have some kind of process underway to re-examine prescription practice on opioids. One of them, of course, is HHS. There is a process within the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid that is looking at imposing safety audits, or edits is what they call them, for dose levels of either 90 or 200 MMED. That one is involved in trying to figure out how they train insurance company people to know when to do that and how to handle it. There is an action underway by the CDC that is attempting to get the answer that they want from a group of people that are also medically qualified in what's called an opioid estimation work group. And that's been underway since last June. The FDA has another patient-centered standards for research.
Red, I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute. This is a call-in show, so we want to take a couple of callers that have been patiently waiting, and maybe you can give them some good advice. Go ahead, Janelle.
Okay, caller from area code 262. What is your name and what's your question?
Hi, this is Dave from Wisconsin. I love the Google tell the task force to submit a statement there, and I love the idea of getting to the judicial hearing regarding the CDC's continuous messing with the numbers. I always thought that if there were a one and you're done sort of reality, that would create a statistic that would be just unavoidable, just enormous. And it, not only is it not jumping out anywhere, but, we can't find it when we look for it. Anyway, Wisconsin suffered a terrible blow today. The U.S. Attorney for the Western District released 2 things yesterday and today, and I just wanted to know if you had seen that yet and what you thought about it, because it strikes me as like a time machine, because this kind of information about enforcement actions and criminal prosecution and fueling addiction, they keep using the word addiction over and over, was like a time machine thing. These things have been going out, and Wisconsin just blasted this out today, and all of us in the Wisconsin DPP, and in fact all the groups saw this, and I didn't know anyone knew we were here, but now It's just like Wisconsin's redoubling its efforts after they've already cut us off. I was cut off, and everyone else is being cut off and cut down, and it just feels like we're being shaved down to nothing. I was wondering if you heard about it. Thanks
what
for your
did they?
time.
Yeah, what did they say? What did the Attorney General say?
This week, the U.S. attorneys have sent letters to over 180 physicians, assistants, nurse practitioners, advising that a review of their prescribing practices show that they were prescribing opioids at relatively high levels compared to other prescribers. The letter warns that these prescribing practices may be contributing to the flow of prescription opioids into illegal markets and fueling dangerous addictions.
Yeah, this is kind of like the witch trials. Yeah, go ahead, Red.
Yeah, here's what's going on with that. Basically, the attorneys general are trying to do two things. One of them is they're trying to turn, quote unquote, overprescription into a cash cow, because they want to go back and sue Purdue Pharma and a few other companies all over again on grounds that the companies have falsely misadvertised the risks of opioids for normal medical treatment. That's one thing going on. The other thing is, if they can't win the argument on the facts, they will try to win it on intimidation, and that is exactly what the attorneys general are doing in several states.
Well, it's horrifying.
We're having the same problem in California. We have the same problem in Arizona. We have the same problem also announced within the last few days in Georgia. And what's really happening is you've got people who never met a piece of data they could understand. So what they do is they ground their legal positions and their advocacy on the opinion of people who have a vested interest in driving pain patients into addiction clinics.
Well, yeah, I've heard that one before, too. Janelle's signaling me that she has another caller. Go ahead, Janelle.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Dave, for calling in. Caller from area code 650. What is your name and what's your question?
Yes, I'm calling in. I've been on opioids for 15 years, very successfully. I've never had any problems, and they gave me my life back. I live in California. Now my doctor is desperate to find me a doctor who will even prescribe opioids for me, never mind in the amounts that I need. I've been turned down by several major practices. The most prominent pain doctors here are retiring. And I want to know, what do I need to do to continue to get this drug that has given me the little quality of life that I have?
Well, for one thing, Tom, you want to do this one?
No, go ahead.
Well, for one thing, you need to write a letter to the state medical board and tell them just what is being done to you. You need to tell them that medication that has worked for a long period of time is being withdrawn because of the hostile regulatory environment. My doctors are being intimidated. I can't find anyone who will treat me, and my life is at risk because I can't. You need to find me a doctor.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is to ask the board, do they have a list of doctors who are taking new patients that don't say you have chronic pain? Are there a list of doctors taking patients with painful disease syndromes? So you got to downplay it. You can also ask the California Medical Board, and even though they don't answer you, if they get enough phone calls, they're going to try to do something about it. The problem is doctors have the prerogative of not doing this. You can't force them. So one of the things that we're trying to look at is teach the doctors how to make more money seeing patients. You're in a desperate situation. You need to go to your legislators. All politics is local. Look up your local representative in the state house. Okay. Get your friends to do it. One person is not good. 5 people is very good. You got to go to them, and it's sad because, like during the civil rights movement, people got out there with signs. Well, we can't do that. People are too sick, and so you just try your best. But, it really is awful. But you got to not take it lying down. You know, you got to write letters like Red said, and you got to call up people, and even though you think it's not helping, it will.
All right.
And when you write the letters,
go ahead.
When you write the letters, there's a message that goes with it, and you know, you describe your situation. You do it in simple words. Try to do it within a couple of pages. People only have so much time to read, but there's a really basic message you need to put out there, and that is that the opioid crisis in America was not created by doctors overprescribing. It's not true. And the CDC guidelines must go. The guidelines must be withdrawn because they are scientifically inaccurate, incomplete, and biased. That document is deadly to patients by the thousands, and it is directly responsible for at least hundreds of patient suicides.
Okay. We have one more caller. Caller from area code 843. What is your name and what's your question?
Hi, Dr. Kline and Janelle. This is Tammy from South Carolina.
Hi, Tammy.
Is there any regulations stating how far, like, am I allowed to drive an hour to a pain management? Because I was declined that 2 weeks ago.
No, that is not against the law. And I want to respond to the previous caller, too. It's very important to realize there are some things that are not against the federal law. One of them is prescribing in high doses. That's not in the federal law. Going and
I was.
Go ahead.
I was being prescribed my medication through my PCP, which he left the practice. I was made to go to pain management, and they took me off my fentanyl, 75 micrograms, cold turkey. I was made to go through withdrawal.
Okay, that's a claim for the medical board. That's malpractice. You can't take somebody suddenly off a drug and cause them to have withdrawals. You get on the internet, look up the Georgia Board or Georgia Board of Medical Examiners. It'll take you there, and there's a little button, complaints, and you just put the doctor's name, calm language, no emotional language, took me off and threw me into withdrawal. That all people have when they've taken opiates longer than 4 weeks. And remember, these people on the medical board are investigators. A lot of them don't have a general knowledge, so you're trying to educate them. You got to keep writing letters complaining. We can't sit back. We need to have 10,000 people respond to this federal. What is it again? Go to what?
It's an interagency task force. I'm sorry.
All right. Interagency task force. Okay. Yeah, I got to get out and get my arrows set. All right, we'll catch you later.
We are going to have to wrap up here, but I wanted to give you both a chance to say something before, or wrap up or say whatever you'd like to say before we get going here. Sorry.
There is a system of laws in our country, and when people say, "Oh, that's the law," look it up, and then send them a copy of the law underlined in the mail. Don't go in there with it, in the mail. You can also attach that to your letter to the board to support your position. So look up the laws. There are no laws. It is legal right now for me to prescribe any FDA-approved narcotic at any dose I feel is necessary. That is the current status of the federal law.
Yeah, it's really hard to find the laws as such, Tom, but there is one thing you can look up that's right out there. It's very easy to find on the net. You can look up American Medical Association Resolution 235.
That's a very powerful thing. They basically, as you know, Red, they basically said the CDC cutoffs are just not valid anymore. So that is a good one to look up and take into your doctor or submit it with your board complaint. So they don't know what's going on. You got to educate them. So Anyway, I thank you to all the callers and to Red for your expertise and your activism, and keep it up.
We'll go working on it. And thank you for those who did call in. I hope we've been useful to you, and we are working on your behalf. If there's one thing to remember in this process, it is the power in a simple statement. You are not alone. We are working to help you.
Good point.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Richard Lawhern, for joining us this evening to help educate us more on the current issues and legislation concerning chronic pain patients. And thank you, Dr. Kline. And let's see. And please don't forget to join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Conspiracies Against Wellness. We're changing up things here. Miss Claudia Morandi will be hosting and interviewing me. I'll be sharing my 25-year personal journey as a chronic pain patient. Big thank you to our audience and the doctors for taking some time out of your evening to join us here at the Doctor's Corner. We will be posting everything up. YouTube posts directly after we are off, and I'll post on all social media platforms as well of these shows if you'd like to listen to them or share them. I'm Janelle Elgaway with Dr. Kline, signing off until next Tuesday. Have a good evening, Call Nation.
This has been The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgaway. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved.